Hi everyone, I'm Laura Jones from Circular PV Alliance. First of all, thank you very much, Catherine, for inviting me to come along and speak about CPVA certified and batteries at this webinar. I'm looking forward to telling you all a bit about CPVA certified, Circular PV Alliance, and how it may or may not apply to batteries. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. I'm here in Nipaluna, Hobart, on the lands of the Muinina people. Palawa people are the custodians of this land due to genocide committed against the Muinina people. I'd like to pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge the fact that circular economy is not a new thing. It is something that First Nations people have been thinking about for a very long time, which we're only just beginning to appreciate now. So I'm Laura. I'm one of the four co-founders of Circular PV Alliance. And we're a small nonprofit that started in 2021 as a group of people who didn't want our PV boom to become a waste problem in the future. So we're a not-for-profit industry body. And in fact, we're a fair bit like ABRI, except in the PV industry. So we're a non-profit, we're an advocacy organisation. We focus on circular economy for PV. And I guess importantly, we focus on what we'd say is a genuine circular economy. So looking at repair and reuse and life extension as more preferable treatments than recycling, although recycling is a very important function as well. We've been working with Catherine for quite a long time. Catherine was one of our advisors way before we even had members. So ABRI is a special friend to us. We have a reciprocal membership with each other. So ABRI is a member of Circular PV Alliance, and Circular PV Alliance is a member of ABRI. And it is very nice to be able to bring something back that hopefully might be of value to the battery industry as much as we think that it's of value to the large-scale PV industry. So today I'm here to talk about CPVA certified. And this is an initiative that we've been developing over the past couple of years, and we're quite proud of it, so I'm excited to be sharing it with you today. It's an initiative that aims to move circular economy forward for PV for large-scale solar farms. So the aim is to move circular economy forward by helping solar farms integrate circular economy deeply into their developments at all stages of its life cycle. It's intended to be a practical and pragmatic approach to circular economy that is within the reach of most solar developers. So it is something that people can do with a little bit of effort and thinking, and demonstrate their commitment to circular economy and move the needle on circularity while we're at it. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to explain CPVA certified as it is and how it applies to solar farms and has applied, and share some learnings. I'm going to talk a little bit about my perspectives of CPVA certified and large-scale grid batteries, which is a potential use case for a framework like CPVA certified. And then we can open for discussion at the end, because the context of this discussion is whether this framework also might make sense for grid-scale batteries. So where did this idea come from? CPVA certified is a little unique. It's a certification for circularity for a solar farm. So the area of the life cycle of equipment that's in the green circle there when devices are being used. A solar panel spends most of its life in a solar farm. So it kind of made sense to us that we would consider circularity from the point of view of where the device spends most of its life. And also CPVA certified aim to fill a gap. So extended producer responsibility schemes are a very important mechanism that we talk about a lot in the context of solar panels and batteries as well, which responsibilize manufacturers for the end of life of their products. So CPVA certified fills the gap in the middle, which is when a piece of equipment is in service, and considers that part of its life in the certification. As I mentioned earlier, this is an initiative that we spent 2024 building. We took it into a social impact focused startup accelerator called Hatch, which we used as a framework to build this product. As part of that, we did working groups, we did interviews, we did background research, and we did our first certification. So our first ever certified solar farm is Bell Bay Solar Farm that is in Tasmania. This is a 4.95 megawatt solar farm owned by Climate Capital, who are one of our founding members. Since then, we've continued to scale. We've got a second certification that's almost complete or complete. And there are several more that are in the process of being developed. So it's an early stage product, but it's functioning and it is a thing that people are using day to day. So what is CPVA certified? It's a structured process to consider circular economy at a solar farm throughout the life cycle. The value propositions of CPVA certified relate to funders and communities and local government. Increasingly, these people are asking for evidence that the renewable energy development, is not going to create a waste problem in the future, and that circular economy has been considered in the development of it. So this is some of the main drivers that we see for people using this kind of certification. There are 4 parts to it. And the first, and the one that we as circular economy experts talk about most often, relate to end of life. One day, everything that is installed in a solar farm is removed from service, all parts of it. So not only the solar panel, but the racking and the concrete and the transformers and the inverters and the cables. So CPVA certified asks developers to think about all of the equipment that is installed in their solar farm and how circular economy is going to apply to it. We have a concept called credible path. And the idea of credible path is there is something that is in service and it needs to make its way to an appropriate end of life management organisation. And this involves several steps. Someone needs to remove it from service. And we'd like it if people treated that equipment with care so that if it still worked, it could be reused. Often there is some stockpiling that needs to happen on site. Sending individual failed elements to a recycler is quite expensive. So you need to have appropriate storage facilities. Transport is expensive for small amounts of equipment, and it also creates carbon emissions. So thinking of that, and also ensuring that it goes to someone who can deal with the equipment properly. The certifications we've had so far have had developers thinking about local service providers. Who is it that is near a solar development? And one example of a certification that engaged a local solar panel recycler to help them manage their solar waste, which reduces the transport and the carbon emissions. Engaging freight providers and thinking through local storage. We've had people calculate the amount of space they need and ensure that that space is available to stockpile equipment locally. Circularity is more than just sending things to recyclers, though. It's also a commitment to being a customer of a circular economy. If we're saying that the economy is circle, we are saying that you need to buy things from that have circular economy inputs, as much as you do be a supplier to it when things are removed from service. So CPVA certified requires an understanding of input circularity. So what is the recycled and reused content of the equipment that you're purchasing and installing? And it also requires people to think of ways that they can use more recycled and reused content in their developments, and B, find innovative uses for the waste that might be produced during construction or the impact of construction to increase the circularity of it. A couple of examples. We've had one developer talk about they had torsion bars, which are the bars that are used in a tracking system. Some of those got damaged during installation, and they found that they could give those to the local farmers who could use them as fence posts. It's a good example of a practical and pragmatic thing you can do to increase circular economy. Another example was using racking systems in solar developments that don't require the land to be flattened And this not only means that you are reducing costs, it also means that you are not having as much impact on the landscape from the construction of that particular solar farm. Really, in CPVA certified, where there are quantitative assessments, but we're also asking people to be imaginative and inventive and find new ways to integrate circular economy into their developments. Another part of circular economy is the concept of loop tightening. If you think of the circular economy, we think of waste hierarchy, we think of repair and life extension and reuse being things that we should try before we recycle products. One example of this, we're currently working with PV Lab, who is Australia's main PV test lab. Now, a solar panel has a device or a part called a backsheet for a monofacial solar panel, which is still used quite regularly. And essentially, it's a bit of plastic sheeting that sits on the back of the solar panel and prevents water ingress from causing faults. When the backsheet fails, you'll tend to get a solar panel that will have an earth fault every time it rains. So we're testing a backsheet repair material with PV Lab, and it's like a paint. You can paint on the back of a solar panel to repair backsheet failures. Backsheet failures happen sometimes in solar farms. For example, if you're mowing the grass around a solar panel and you flick a rock up and it hits the back of a solar panel, it can cause a fracture in the backsheet. And if you can repair that backsheet fracture, it's better than removing that solar panel from service and installing a new one. And the last part asks developers to think about policies and procedures. These are what give impetus to and drive the actions needed to underpin circular economy. So, for example, plans, policies, procedures, guidelines that say how circular economy is integrated into the solar farm. Training materials for new employees or for maintenance workers. Selection criteria for tenders and regular reporting fit in this category. One example was one of a developer who was getting their solar farm certified, built an end-to-end circularity policy that set out all elements of circular economy for their development. For example, it said what the selection criteria would be for circular economy and tenders and how they would be assessed for circularity. Wrong side. So what does it look like in practice? This is the first certification, so all finalized certifications are on the CPVA website. If you go to Circular PV website, you can see the outcomes of, you can see this document. Essentially, it's a series of standards that talk about different elements of circularity. Some of them are required and some of them are optional, and it depends on the type of certification that you're doing that drives what's optional and what's mandatory, and I'll go through that in a second. There are 4 parts, and they're roughly aligned with the life cycle I described before. The first relate to planning, and this is where we're asking things like, do you have a service provider for circular economy? Do you know where equipment's going to go at the end of its life? About design, how are you integrating design, circular economy into the design? And an example of, less land flattening is a good example of that. Plans and procedures. What are the procedures for when you remove equipment from service, and how are they going to be treated with care so that if they still work, they can be reused? Funding guarantees, ensuring that you have funding to do all of the things that you need to when equipment's removed from service. And the actions that you might do to build a circular economy around the development. Some of these standards are quantitative, some of them are qualitative. So some of them involve numerical evidence, some of them involve the developer to describe what they've done. And we've done that deliberately because we would like people to be a little bit inventive in this and find new ways to integrate circular economy that we haven't thought of before. The second set relates to procurement. So this is, doing due diligence on your supply chain to ensure that there's no slavery in it, to ensure that when a manufacturer says that they do things in a particular way, they actually do. Understanding the recycled and reused content of your development. Things that you've done to increase recycled and reused content, embodied carbon, and actions to reduce embodied carbon. Operations relates to the day-to-day. So how do you reduce emissions from construction and operations? An example of this was one developer had described to us how they had put condition monitoring systems in that meant that they didn't have to travel to site as often. And traveling to site does emit carbon because you have to drive, you have to fly. And repair and reuse in practice. So how is repair and reuse built into your solar farm day to day? And decommissioning, I talked about that earlier, ensuring that you have a credible path between the equipment you have in service and the end of life management organisation. As I mentioned before, there are different types of certification, and it depends on the size of the solar farm and whether the solar farm's already been built or not. Small solar farm have less onerous standards because usually small developers have less capability to do some of the work that might be involved in some of the standards. Retrospective is for a solar farm that's already been built because, for example, we're asking about how you integrate circular economy into your procurement, and if you've already procured the equipment, that's a little hard to answer. But our expectation is that more new certifications will be for before the solar farm's been built, because we don't want retrospective certification to become an easy way out. As I mentioned before, some standards are required and some are optional. The red boxes are the ones that are required for a retrospective small solar farm, which is the least onerous of all of the certifications. If more than 50% of the optional standards are met, an exceed certification is awarded. So that lets people demonstrate they've gone the extra mile. How does certification work? It's a fairly simple process. First, you ask us to certify your solar farm. We provide you with a template which has all of the questions underpinning the standards that I mentioned before. You fill it out and in process probably do some work. So for example, writing procurement processes and things like that. Then we assess the development of the evidence that you provided us. Once we are happy with that assessment and you're happy with it, we send it to an independent assessor. This independent assessor is someone who works for neither Circular PV Alliance or you, and independently checks our certification to ensure that we've done a good job. And if all of that's good, the development is certified. So one of the main reasons I'm here is to discuss if and how a framework like CPVA certified could be applied to grid scale batteries. We have had inquiries from solar farms with batteries already. And to be clear, CPVA certified is for solar farms, but it's not necessarily just about the solar panel component of a solar farm. We ask developers to think about their entire plants, and we've seen that already. For example, torque tubes are not solar panels, but they are part of the considerations already. And if that particular development includes batteries, then including the batteries in that assessment would be part of that work. But it's also not specifically about them. And we aren't battery experts. And the question is, do you need to think about batteries differently to what you might for solar farms and the rest of the balance of plant that would be in a solar battery farm? So to think this through, I've got 3 questions I'm going to provide some thoughts on. And then we can, Catherine might give a quick discussion, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. Questions are, is CPVA certified a good or useful framework for grid scale batteries? If so, what would we change about it for grid scale batteries? And if we've done that, how would this be applied to grid scale batteries? I'm going to go through my thinking now, just quickly, and then we can have a discussion. So question 1, is this a good framework for batteries? Now, I'm pretty biased in this. I think that CPVA certified is a pretty good framework, but that's also because we made it and we're quite proud of it. To answer this question, I go back to the purpose of CPVA certified, the kind of vision that drove it. We want this to move the needle on circularity in grid scale solar plants. We want this to have some demonstrable outcomes and actions that we can use, and we can show that this certification was worth it. Which means the questions around batteries are, where is the needle on circularity in grid scale batteries? Would a framework like CPVA certified genuinely have developers thinking about things that they might not have thought about before? How do developers think of circular economy already? Are the value propositions for batteries similar to what they are for solar? Are communities and local government already asking about circularity for batteries? What about funders? Is there already good answers for those questions? The next question asks about what's different about batteries. Now, we're PV experts, we're not battery experts, and that's, I guess, the crux of why we're here. But when I think about circular economy for grid scale batteries, I think of a few things. Chemistry. What are the opportunities in battery chemistry? Lifetime, recyclability, reusability. How is this different amongst battery chemistries? And is there optionality for developers in the chemistry they purchase? Repair and reuse. I expect there are unique factors to batteries, like safety, that are perhaps less applicable to solar panels. But what are they, and how do they influence the practices that you might use in a battery development? I'd assume that batteries are relatively modular because they contain lots of cells, but I don't know the extent to which technology development would lead to that being less possible. Suppliers, how different are they? Can you buy batteries with recycled content? Can you buy reused batteries? For example, I've seen lots of people talk about second life electric vehicle batteries being suitable for grid scale batteries. And that's a good example of circular economy inputs in my book. Life cycle, what is the reuse and recycling landscape? And what are the opportunities to design circularity into the operations of a battery farm? And the last question relates to how would a framework like CPVA certified be applied to batteries? We're not specialized in batteries, as I said, and I think if something was specific batteries, it would be someone who is potentially like ABRI. So, for example, is there an ABRI certified or is there something else? How's it applied? How's it applied to solar and battery farms? Is it applied to batteries alone? So just before we get to questions, what I thought I'd do is I'd map out a bit of a path for if a certification for batteries made some sense. So the first question is, does CPVA for certified for batteries have merit? And this is maybe the discussion today might help us answer that question. If we do that, we define a bit of a framework. How do we think it might work? We find a test case. It was really important for CPVA certified to have someone who had a development who was willing to give it a crack. And you want the same thing in this case. Then you need to co-produce a certification. One thing that we did for CPVA certified was we had workshops every month or so where we talked about the questions that had come up and got insights and feedback. And then once we've done that and we've had a certification, then that's kind of when the product is live and we can have people doing certifications if that's what they'd like. So now I think it's time to have a bit of a discussion.